So today we're going to be going over an inspector. How do you use an inspector? How do you open an inspector? What does it all mean? So the first thing you're going to have to do is pull out the dev tool from the Resonite Essentials folder. Now, some people have their own custom tools like multi-tools or developer tools, but for now, I'm going to be teaching you with the basics. So to access this dev tool, go to the Resonite Essentials public folder in your dash. Now, everybody has this in their dash, and you can go to the Resonite Wiki page to receive it if for some reason you have lost it. So within Resonite Essentials, there is a tools folder. Go ahead and double click on that. And then the first tool is going to be the Resonite developer tool. Double click that to bring it out. Now, you can equip a tool in multiple ways. One is you can click on the tool and it will give you an option to equip it. Another is you can simply grab the tool with your laser and then reel it in with your joystick, and it will automatically equip to your hand. And then another one is by using your tool shelf. So your tool shelf is this sort of like gray see-through square that is on both of your wrists. Now, this is very, very useful for tools, thus the name tool shelf. So you can take the tool that you currently have equipped in your hand, and then with your laser, with that tool, just click on the tool shelf, and it will automatically put the tool on your tool shelf. Now, this is really nice because, first of all, it stores it there for you, so you don't always have to have your tool equipped to your hand. And then second of all, if you have another tool, this is my multi-tool, then you can actually have the tool in your hands, and then you can click the tool on your tool shelf, and it will switch those tools out. Right. So now that you have the developer tool, and make sure it is equipped, you can open an inspector on an object or a world or really anything. The way that you do this is you're going to select the object first. Now, the reason that you want to select first before you open an inspector is if you have nothing selected first, then the inspector is going to open up by default to the root of the world. This can be a little performant heavy, and you won't be able to find the item that you want to edit very easily if you're on the root. So, once you have the object, you can spawn it out from your inventory, or maybe it's already in the world. I just brought out a little sprout. This is just a simple sprout model that has a dynamic bone on it, and that's why it's wiggly. So I have that there. Now I'm going to point with the laser that I have connected to my hand, the hand that specifically has the tool equipped to it. With my laser, I'll point at the object, and then I'll hit my secondary button, like so. And it creates a gizmo. Now, if you don't know what your secondary button is, for index users, it is going to be pressing your touchpad down. For touch controllers or Oculus users, I believe it is your clicking your joystick should be your secondary. And then if you're on desktop, because you can do all this on desktop as well, it is your R key that is going to be your secondary. So once you have something selected, it will be selecting the collider of the object, for example. And you can open an inspector on it from here. So once it's selected, you open up your context menu with your hand that has the tool equipped to it, and there is an option that says Open Inspector. It's a little white button sort of near the top, generally. So you click that, and it will open up an inspector. Looks like this. So now that we have an inspector open, let's move this over here. I will go over a little bit how it works. Like, what do these buttons mean? So now that we have this inspector open, I'll show you a little bit how to use it. Now, it will automatically open to the slot that you have selected. the slot that you have selected will almost always be the collider of the object. Because when you point at an object, the collider is what makes your laser stop. Your laser is a raycast, and it will collide with the collider. So when you select that, it is selecting the collider. Now, so you can see here, this is the name of the slot on the sprout that has the collider on it. This is a box collider component right here. So say I want to change the color of the sprout from like green to something wacky, like blue. Now, first of all, I will have to find the slot that the material of this sprout is on, because in order to change the color of the sprout, I have to find the material for it. The material is going to be on the mesh renderer, which is a component that allows the sprout to be seen. It allows the mesh of the sprout to be visible, be rendered. In order to navigate an inspector, you have these two buttons right here. Now, the simplest way to describe these buttons is the one on the left. That is going to go up to the root of the object. Sometimes it is not necessarily going to be the root of the object. There is another component called object root, and if you put that on a separate slot, it'll just go to that slot. But generally, if you click this, it will go to a root. Now, this root right here is not the actual root of the object itself. So say I go up one more, like that. This is the root of the object. Generally, you can generally tell if it's the root of the object either by going up one more slot. By the way, going up one slot is the button on the right. So if I do this, it will go up one. Now this is my user root right here. On campus, we have a system that puts the user or their user root underneath a slot. And so anything that I spawn out will show here. But that aside, you can see that this sprout is actually, and it's selected right now, this sprout is the root of the sprout. So, okay, I want to focus back on just the root slot. So I just want to see what I was seeing before. In order to do that, there is a button all the way on the right over here. It's got those two arrows that kind of point in towards that line. If I click that, it goes back to the slot that I have selected. Now, you can also generally tell if this is the root of an object, because oftentimes, especially if the object is grabbable, like if you can grab the object, then it will have the grabbable component on that root slot, which is right here. So now I'm at the conundrum of, okay, so I got into the root of the object, and I know how to navigate up to an object root, and I know how to navigate up one. So I also know how to focus on a slot. But I need to find where the material is. Where is the mesh renderer that has that material? So in order to search the hierarchy of an object, now a hierarchy, if you're familiar with Unity at all, then you will probably know what a hierarchy is. And this also goes for File Explorer and stuff like that. It's folders within folders. Now I can navigate a hierarchy by hitting these little down arrows next to the slots. So if I hit the down arrow there on the root, you can see it has the next two children slots. If a slot is a child of another slot, it means it's right below it, like that. And then, so for example, the armature right here is a child of the root right there. And the root is the parent of the armature. That's what you call the slot that's right above another slot. Excuse me, Bbot. That's Bbot, by the way. He just hangs out. Don't mind him. So, if I want to keep navigating down the hierarchy, then I just continue to hit these down arrows. So you can see now the armature has the bones in it, And this is where you can connect like dynamic bones and stuff to make things wiggly. So where is the mesh renderer usually on an object? Well, it's usually going to be a single slot by itself. Now, this is usually, sometimes it can be completely different. I'm going off of what is sort of the basics, so to say. So if I'm looking at this, all of these bones go way down, but the mesh is usually outside of the armature by default. So, well, this one, it has no children, and it is outside of the armature, so let me check that. And that's just a collider, so that's not it. See, just the box collider. So let me try the one right above it. Okay, so we have the mesh renderer. This one's a skinned mesh renderer, which means it has a rig on it. It has an armature. It can move around. That's what a skinned mesh renderer is. Normally, if it's a static object, you will just see mesh renderer, and that's it. And it will have a lot less to it. Like this one has a list of bones. Mesh renderers usually don't. Only skin mesh renderers tend to. So, under the mesh renderer, skin mesh or not, we have a list of materials. You can see that right here, materials list. This one only has one material. So I want to take that material out so I can edit it, because the only way to change the color through the inspector is to access the material that's on it. A couple different ways that you can do this. One, there are a couple of buttons here. One is an arrow that kind of goes out and up, and then another one is an arrow that just goes up. So in order to pull out the dialogue, or, oh my god, Bbot, can you please? In order to pull out the dialogue for this material, you can hit the little one on the right, so the arrow that just goes straight up. So the inspector will move back a little bit, and then the dialogue will pop up in front. Now, back up. So this is the material. And the color for the material, the main color, is going to be this right here. It just says color. And you can see that it is the right color because, it's green, just like the sprout. And, sometimes it'll have like some sort of texture, and there's like a whole bunch of other options on here, but we can get more into that later. In order to change the color on something, just click that box of the color. So I'm going to click that green, and it brings up a color dialog, color picker. So if I wanted to change it, to blue, let's say, you just click that, and then that's really it. All you have to do is, oh, maybe I'm gonna make it a little brighter. There we go. And there's all sorts of things in the color dialog that you can choose from. But normally, this is just fine, just sort of the basic settings it's on. And then you click save to make sure that it saves the color. So now you can see in the material, it's blue. And I can exit out of this now the dialog, now that I'm done editing it. Like that, the X. And now I can grab the sprout, and it's blue! Look at that! Alright. By the way, say I don't want this gizmo anymore. I'm like, oh my god, this gizmo is in the way, visually it's very messy. And also, when it comes to gizmos, you can move the gizmo around with your dev tool by grabbing these axes. The way that you grab the axes and move them around is by pointing at it with your laser, with the dev tool, and clicking and holding down your primary, your trigger on your controller. Now, this is just moving around the collider that I have selected. If you have moved something around like that, and you're like, oh, shoot, like I didn't mean to move that, then you actually do have a undo button. You do have an undo button in your context menu right here. So it's this sort of red back arrow, and I'm like, "Oh, shoot." So right now, I you just saw me grab the sprout and move it out of the way, so if I undo this, the sprout will move back. It'll undo my grab. And you can keep doing the undo. You can do it multiple times. So if I do it again, you can see it says translate, or perhaps you can't see it. Translate along axis. I can click that again. And whatever I did to this, if I hit undo, it will undo the action. If I want to redo, there's also a redo button. Redo like that, back and forth. Right. So if I want to clear the gizmo, right, coming back to that, then there is an option on your context menu that says deselect all. Now, when you hit deselect all, be warned, it will deselect all the gizmos in the world. So if you're in a world working on things with other people and they have things selected and they're trying to perhaps use their gizmo to move things around, then you hitting that button on your dev tool in your context menu, it will deselect their gizmo as well. So you want to be very conscious of this. There are tools and mods that will allow you to deselect only your own gizmos. When you're out and about, make sure to ask people about this. Like, hey, I don't want to, deselect everybody's gizmos. Do you have something that will help me just deselect my own? So now these other buttons, if I want to delete a slot, then I can use this little trash can up here. So, for example, say I wanted to delete the collider that's right here, right? Let me back up a little bit. If I want to delete the collider that's right here, and I have it selected right now, you can tell because whenever you select something in the inspector, it will actually put a gizmo around that thing on the object. So if I select the mesh, then you can see the gizmo is now surrounding the mesh. The bounding box is characterized by these blue dashed lines, and you can see that it does change depending on what I have selected. So say I wanted to select these bones. As I go down, the bones go up the sprout. That's a bone chain. I can go over dynamic bone chains later. So anyway, if I wanted to delete this collider that's on the leaves right here, there's two different ways I can do that. One of them is by clicking this trash can. It's the one over here on the left. Now, there is a difference between the trash can and the recycle symbol right next to it. The trash can will delete the slot and the assets that are on it. Now, if I wanted to do a soft delete, then I would click this recycle instead. I usually just delete it straight out. It's sort of up to you which one you want to use. So these other buttons here, so we have 3 more left to cover. Let's say I wanted to make some slots that are like in between these ones. So I can put different components on it, so I can make them do different things, that kind of thing. So this button that has the arrow up the side and the little purple bar above the plus, that makes a parent of the slot that you were currently on. So say I want to make a parent of this root slot. I would select the root slot like that, and then hit that button. And you can tell that it does this because it says root parent. You have made a parent of the root. And if I go up in the hierarchy, you can see that the base of the object, sprout, right there, it has a slot now between that and the root. Now, say I wanted to make a child of the root. That is the next button over, one right here. So I'm still selected on the root. I've made the parent, but the parent's not selected. The root is still selected. I can click that, And then it makes a child of that root slot. And you can see there it says root child, and it is underneath the root. So that's what those two buttons do. These are very useful, especially if you are making objects or adding things to objects. Now, this next one is a duplicate button. So this will duplicate the slot that I am on. Now this is very useful for multiple reasons. Say I have this slot, say I have a bunch of components on it, right? And I'm like, okay, I need to make a slot that's just like it, but I don't want to add all those components again. Then I would hit that button. Now, down here at the bottom of the inspector, you can see attach component right here. You just click that, and then it comes up with this component dialog. There is a lot in here. Now, there are searchers and mods that are community made that allow you to search through this. But without those tools, you kind of just have to explore or know what you're doing. There are some tutorials and tools that I can link or mention in the description below as well. So right now, all I'm going to add is what is called a spinner. This is located in a section of the dialog that is very commonly used. That is called transform drivers. So we go to the folder called transform, which is right down here. This one. If I double click that, and then the spinner is going to be in drivers, which is the top here. Now this is where all the fun stuff is. You can make it do a whole bunch of fun stuff with this. You can make it like wiggle, you can make it spin around, you can make it like grow and shrink and all this stuff. So drivers, and then there's a lot of it. So the spinner, and these are in alphabetical order, so the spinner is down here in the S's. And all you have to do to add the components to the slot that you're on in the inspector is double click that component. And you can tell that the component got placed on there because very briefly, if you saw, the component dialog as well as the inspector itself flashed. Now, I just want the spinner, I could keep this open over here if I wanted to. If I'm like adding a bunch of components to different slots and stuff, I could keep it out and reuse it. But for now, we just need the spinner. So for now. All right. So when you put a spinner on an object or on a slot, it will automatically take the rotation, because you can see the transforms of the slot up here. There is position, rotation, and scale. Now it's going to take the rotation, yes. It's going to take the rotation and automatically drive it in the spinner. So the target here, the drive, you can see the rotation on the slot is already in there. And you can tell that it's being driven. You can tell if a value is being driven because it gets highlighted purple like this. So now that the rotation is being driven, we can change the speed of the spinner right here. And you want to change these numbers in the speed depending on which axis you want it to be turning on. So let's say I grab my sprout again, and I'm like, okay, I want to figure out which axis this needs to be spinning on. So once you have your slot selected, the slot with the spinner, and I'm looking at the axes here. Now, the green axis is going to be Y, the blue is going to be Z, and the red is going to be X. So by the looks of it, I want it to spin this way on the Y axis. So in the inspector, under speed, I am going to change the speed here to, say, 10. Right. And now you can tell by the axes that it is slowly spinning on that slot. Now the reason the sprout itself is not spinning is because this slot is all by itself. There's nothing underneath the slot. So in order to make the entire sprout spin with the spinner, then we are going to put the root of the sprout underneath the spinner. The easiest way to do this, one, we have to move the slot into a different part of the hierarchy, the spinner slot. We want it to be the parent of all the rest of the stuff on the sprout. So I'm just going to move this. The way that you can move a slot, if I move this way, is you can actually grab it. So if you point your laser at it and you use your grab, then it will grab the slot like this. You can move a slot by just pointing your laser at a different one and letting go. You can see that it is now a child of the sprout. I moved it to under the sprout. So let's collapse this so you can see it a little bit easier. So now we have the root child that has the spinner on it. And, to make things easier, I'm going to rename this slot. So I can just click on the name dialog up here, or the name field up there. And with my keyboard, that is local to myself, so you can't see it, I am just going to name it spinner. Like that. So I know that that is the slot that is spinning. Now, the sprout itself is underneath root, because if you recall, this cube has the mesh renderer on it, and this armature has all the bones and things in it. And that is all just underneath this root, which is underneath this root parent that we made. So that's just an extra slot for now because I was demonstrating. But an empty slot is not a huge deal. At least, not right now. So, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the entire sprout from the root parent here to underneath the spinner. So that way, the spinner is moving this slot plus everything underneath it. Grab that, and then put it under the spinner. That. Now you can see, maybe I'll deselect the gizmo. Now you can see that the sprout is spinning. Pretty nifty. Want a spinning sprout? That's how you make it. Now you can use any object that you want for this, any model. There's lots of ways that you can import models. There's lots of models that are already in Resonite that you can use. You can get them from public folders, anything like that. So now that we know a little bit about how to use the inspector, I like to point out a few tips and tricks if you're working fairly quickly with it. Now, say I have a field, like a float 3, which is, for example, position. You have 3 different inputs here, and it is type float, which means that the type of number it is a float number. So it has like decimals and things. Now, say I wanted to copy this position float 3 exactly as it is to a different float 3 in the inspector. So in order to demonstrate this easily, I'm going to go to a different slot, like so. And I'm just going to attach a data field. So now if I have a float 3 value field, data field, on this slot, and I want to copy over that position, float 3, to this field exactly as it is, then all I'd have to do is go back to that position there. And you can see on here that each one of these types, or each one of these fields, gizmo out of the way, has these little like squares next to them. And those show you the type that they are. And you can also do things with those squares. You can click on them and things happen. So, one way you can use them is you have your laser and you can hover over that and then grab with your controller. And then now it has that float 3 directly. You're grabbing that float 3 value directly. So the way I can put this in a different field is while I'm grabbing it, I'll go to the other slot, this field value here, and then with my laser, I hover over the value itself, like the word value right there, and then I drop the value in there. Frick, I dropped it. And by dropped it, it means I didn't have my laser directly over it. I'll use that as an example too. This stuff is hard to get used to. And in fact, you know what, to make it even easier on myself, I will actually open up a new inspector for the other slot. And there's a really easy way to do this, and it's very useful. So I want to open up the spinner slot in a different inspector. So I just grab that slot, and then I have my laser outside of any UI, and I just click. And it will automatically open another inspector. Now, let's see. I'm going to move back a little bit. See a little bit more. So, and I will deselect, because every time you select a new slot, the gizmo will show up on the object. So I'm just going to put it there for now. All right. So now you can probably see a little bit more clearly. I'm going to grab that position by grabbing that little square next to the word position, and I'm going to drop it on the value like that. And now you can see in the value field that it has that exact float 3 position. So that is how you can copy a value directly. Now, or transfer a value, so to say. There is also a component called value copy. Now this is a drive. Instead of just dropping a value into another field, this drives a value to a field. So say no matter how I change, if I wanted to change this position of the sprout or of this spinner thing for the sprout, then, I would just sort of like type into the position how I'd want it to change. But if I want this value field to change along with it, so I don't have to drag it over every single time, all I'd have to do is grab the word position. Instead of grabbing the square next to it, I grab just position, and then I can drop it over the word value here. And it will give you a context menu, a couple of options that say drive or drive right back. Normally, you just hit drive. And then it will automatically put a value copy on to that value. And you can see here that it actually brings in the component value copy float 3. That is a very easy way to make value copies. You don't have to go through the component dialog or anything like that. All you have to do is drag and drop. And you can see as well, by the fact that it's purple, it is being driven. So if I change the position up here, then it will drive this to make the same changes. Now, there's more things that you can do with these little boxes here. So say on this one, on this value field that I have just driven, say I don't know what's driving it, right? Then all I would have to do is when you see the purple driven value and you don't know what's driving it, like say you want to edit whatever is driving it, but you don't know where it is, you can actually click that box next to the value there, and it will give you a context menu of different options that you can choose. Now, the open link/drive source is what you want if you're trying to find the source. And then it brings up the value copy float 3 that is driving it. Now, obviously, we can see it right here, but say it was on like a different slot, something like that. Then, in order to bring up an inspector so we can look at that component on the slot that it's on, there is another button on this dialog. It's purple, you can see it, like, right here. If you click that, it will bring up the inspector that has that component on it, which, right now is the same inspector we have over here, but, if you can't find it, then this will lead you exactly to where it is, and that is very useful. Now, these are all little tiny buttons, but they're really, really useful to know about. So, I don't really need those dialogues right now, or windows, I should say. So, now say I wanted this value field on here, but I don't want the value copy to be there too. Or yeah, say I needed to move the component from this slot in this inspector to a different slot. So, let's see. By the way, you can delete inspectors as well by just holding it with your laser or your hand and destroying it through your context menu, like you would destroy or delete anything else. That will also get rid of an inspector. So say I wanted to put this value copy on a different slot. So the easiest way you can do that, say I wanted to put it on the base of the object itself, on the sprout slot. So I'm going to pull out a new inspector for that. And you can see, on the root of the whole thing, on the sprout, it has that grabbable. And I want to move this component over this slot. You just grab the title of that component with your controller, like that, and then while you're hovering over the UI for that slot, let go of it, and you will get an option to copy the component or move the component. Also cancel. Although, you can also just drag your laser off of the menu itself and it will cancel it automatically. So if I want to move it, I just hit move component. Now you can see that I have moved that component from this inspector to this one. Pretty nifty. So I don't have to re-add it and then redrive it and all of that kind of stuff. I can just move it right over. Now in the same dialog that lets you open the drive source, you can also break a drive. This is useful for, say you're trying to do something really quickly and you know that it's not going to ruin everything about the project, and you just need the drive to be broken so you can edit it a lot easier, a lot faster. And you can just break the drive like that. Now, you can see it's not being driven anymore because it's not purple. And then also, the value copy that was driving it, this target right here is nulled out. So you can see right here where it was driving the target of that value field, it is now nulled out because I broke the drive. That's a useful one. There are other options as well, like setting the value to be a default value. Like, for example, let's kind of mess with this a little bit. One thing that I often like to use when it comes to that little dialogue when you click on this. So say I want to reset this to 0. I could use that dialogue in some cases. Another thing that you can do is you can grab a number, grab a field that is already in the inspector. So, for example, this update order right here, there's a 0 in there. And I wanna put 0 in for these other fields as well. So I don't have to type in 0 for all of those. I can actually just grab the 0 value from that field, and then I can drop it in these ones. Like that. And now it's zeroed out. And I could do that for any number that's just already on here as well, like this, 81.988. I could just drop it in like that. Undo. There we go. So another thing that you can do is, say I set this X value to 2. Now I want the other ones to be 2 as well, but instead of either dragging and dropping or typing in, I can actually click this again. There's set all to Z, set all to Y, and set all to X. And so I can click set all to X, and it will set all of these values to what the X value is. When it comes to resetting values as well, there are 3 very, very nice buttons that can reset the local transforms of a slot. And that is going to be right here. So you can see it says reset and then position, rotation, and scale. That is how you use an inspector. That is how you edit things in the world. Select, open inspector, go up to the root like that. You can move it around by grabbing the axes with your trigger. You can undo if you need to. You can also add components. So let's just do a spinner again. Transform drivers. Double click, you'll see it flash. And there's the spinner. We do the speed there. Like so. Deselect. Ta-da! And yeah, I mean, there is a lot more as well. But those are some tips and tricks, basics. And that's all for today.